Hey guys, Thomas Sicily Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie Insidious, The Red Door. If you end up enjoying this full movie review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you help support me and my channel directly. And fourth to my Discord server, where we can join, collab, and chill, and do all that cool stuff. And chilling will be reminded to the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let's get into Insidious, The Red Door. So obviously this review is a little bit on the late end, as gaming stuff has been taking a slight priority in terms of my channel, but I'm always going back and forth between them as when I can conceivably get to them. So that's why this one's getting a little bit late. At any rate, we're here. And I did see the trailers for this one quite a few times. And, you know, ever since Insidious came out, I initially thought, okay, this was a pretty decent movie. And then after thinking about it some more, it started to just dwindle rather quickly in terms of its staying power. And much so over that came over the sequel. And now we have ourselves a horror franchise in Insidious, which apparently this is them calling it the quote-unquote finale, which with horror and, well, franchises in general, I always just raise my eyebrow at that one, now, because you never really know, if a movie makes enough money, you always just raise that eyebrow and saying, are you sure about that? Because, something tells me that you want to, and even the ending of the movie seems to indicate, we're leaving the door open, just in case. Anyways, getting into the movie itself, we begin seeing the Dalton family, seeing a psychiatrist, and the father and the son, who are possessed in the first movie, the son in the first movie, and then the father in the second, respectively. So, or, whatever, being whisked away into the place they call in this movie the Further. So they have their memories wiped via a psychoanalytical trick. And it seems to work, at least for 9 whole years. But, however, we then cut to that 9 years later, and we immediately cut to a funeral in which Dalton's mother passes away, and he doesn't know how he's gonna try to take care of the situation. He's just trying to make sure that everyone's, as much as him can dealing with all that stuff while also dealing with the divorce and so on and so forth. However, during this little sequence, he sees someone at the funeral in which he asked him the name, and he seems to have his first struggle in remembering events from prior. And we see that our possession stuff is starting to take hold already, as when Dalton is over the phone, we see a slow-moving object, or figure, behind the car that vanishes before he can see it. So a lot of these are for the audience tension and slow stuff, if you're not paying attention to direct confrontations we'll see later on. However, I will say that the pacing of this movie, right out of the gate, is significantly slower, at least from what I can remember from the previous movie. And I don't know if that's necessarily a great thing. Now, here's the thing about horror, and specifically when it comes to pacing. I will address this. In terms of it, I personally believe that a great horror can build suspense and build tension and that is through certain levels of pacing, and that is dragging certain things out, but with the horror element added on top of it. It does take a key of mastery in the horror genre to accomplish this. However, I will say, in Insidious's case, their gimmicks do run into the unfortunate problem of running stale pretty much instantly. If you've seen the previous two movies and those weren't built in tension and they felt more like attempts at pretty lame, slow jump scares, then that is pretty much the ascension of this entire movie, unfortunately. So that is the extent of that. And again, I do believe that true horror should derive from being able to derive tension from not only the pacing, but through atmosphere, music, and as well as acting. And that is one of the things that is cut from the equation, at least the first time around. So there is that removed element, because again, that first attempt is for the audience to be like, ooh, there's something there. Anyway, so we see that Dalton is quite the artist. In fact, that seems to be what he's going to college for. And when there, he gets his co-resident, this woman named Chris. Dalton is trying to, when he's with his father alone, sees why his father and mother got a divorce through their talk. And after he leaves, he talks with Chris about how he forgot the whole year while he was 10, that being the movie and the predecessor event that we saw, the whole memory wipe sequence. However, this has seemingly left some side effects, like still being afraid of the dark. So phobias that have lingered on from those events despite memory loss of the specific event, which I guess I do find fascinating. I guess where your memory is stored and where your fears, are, wherever they are stored in the brain, are probably in two different sections of the brain. So I guess that makes sense. Again, I'm not a brain expert per se, but I'll go with it, sure. Anyway, so the dad, experiencing certain memory stuff himself, says he'll try to figure out his stuff in his own way. Now, we cut to them in the teaching room, in the art class, and we get a pretty interesting art instructor who she instructs everyone to bring their art pieces in and tells the students, at least one of them, she points to one of them and says, tear up your piece of work. And when someone refuses to, she says, well, you quit before you even tried in this class. So he is told to leave. I'm assuming this is told on, well, it can't be the first day because they already brought in their pieces, so still early in the semester, but not first day, I'm assuming. So yeah, pretty interesting. Now, I've heard about this from art classes. I've taken one before, but my teacher never had us do this specific little thing. This is apparently to help students essentially move on from their previous work, not to get too attached from the work that they have done. Now, I get the sentiment behind it, but I also do understand the drawbacks to it as well. It's not a perfect, by any means, teaching method. of getting students to understand that they need to move on from their work. I mean, you have to build in art. You have to eventually start building a portfolio. So that is something that I do feel like conflicts with that sort of art destruction of your old art stuff. So I don't know. There is that whole piece to it, an aspect in thinking about it. So definitely far from perfect. Anyway, art brain aside, moving back to the plot, Dalton himself begins to make a little bit of an interesting piece when tearing up his own piece, because he is like, I'll follow what she's putting down, and she's actually like, why'd you destroy this piece of art? And then he's like, it's said to, or whatever. And then she's like, yep, then I did do that. But then she follows up with doing a new thing, and he is put in quite in a phase and draws, surprise, surprise, this red door. This is somewhere apparently in the further, as we see later on in the movie. Meanwhile, we cut back to the dad, and he's going through more stuff where the lights turn out and he calls out. And he's going to get like a brain scan, and then this is all happening during this little sequence. And after the fact, when he's told that there's nothing wrong with him, at least not that the scan could tell, the doctor says to try to play some kids' memory games to help with memory. And so we'll see how that turns out later on. Meanwhile, Dalton frames his little picture that he made, and after he frames it, the light bulb in his room has blood on it, and he's like, no, whatever. But Chris eventually goats Dalton into going to some frat party that the dad said to go to earlier on in the movie. So they sneak into a room, and Dalton hears some guy vomiting. And the person says, close the door, but this figure we'll see later on is not quite a humanoid. However, after they're about to leave, they almost get caught, so Chris commits to having a bit where she kisses Dalton, and then they proceed to leave after they almost get caught doing, I guess, just being there. I don't know. So after they leave, Dalton sees that he can head back into the further. This is where he begins to play a song, and Chris, later on that night, hears this from her world, or sphere, or whatever you want to call it, and indeed knows something is up pretty quickly. So he gets a knock on the door, because they are like in separate dorms at this point. So he tries to explain his experience to her, and he's like, I know you won't probably believe this, and she's like, probably will. And if you noticed, not a lot of ghost stuff going on right now, except the ghost guy, and that wasn't very, it was very, pretty undrastically not well tensioned, nothing, just going through the motions almost, Anyways, we cut back to the dad, who's entering into the whole memory game where he has all these pictures, and he's trying to match, I guess he has like two of each picture, and he's like trying to match them, And each time, once again, we see a figure in the distance, and there's a third time around when he sees a man begin to actually chase him. So now the threat is actually within his sequence. So at least there is some level of build up and tension for the actual character, unlike before. So there is some level of escalation. I just would have hoped it would have been significantly better than this. Anyway, so the dad is knocked out into the further. All the while, Dalton sees a rather famous picture, and he gets a flashback. So he decides to call his younger brother and sees what he can try to glean from him. Dalton begins staring at the red door after the fact. And after the words, Chris joins him, and shows him this video into these two guys, the ones from the previous movies, about the whole astral projection thing, as well as Elise, who is obviously one of the main characters that has made this movie, anywhere near a success outside of the main characters, I suppose. Anyway, Chris and Dalton head back to the frat house because Dalton wants to make contact with the ghost he saw from before. So they do it, the countdown that is, and the lights turn out. However, in this little moment, Chris is almost killed in the process of this happening, but is knocked out very briefly. Meanwhile, we cut back to the dad, who goes back to his ex-wife very briefly, and then we get Dalton goes back to talking with his brother about the drawing and what it all means. And he's like shooting text or getting text, I forget which one it is. And they finally unveil that from the previous movie that the dad was possessed and trying to kill them. So the younger son shows the parents that something is going on. Dalton, meanwhile, pushes through the flashback of his dad away. This is where the movie gets a little bit wonky, more so being. And Dalton is being messed with other flashbacks of what happened to him. And Chris comes in, or, regains and comes in. And Dalton moves as she's adjusting the lights. We see that he is now possessed. So the dad makes his way into the further. So these are correlating events, more or less. Or moments that are close to one another in terms of a timeline. Meanwhile, Chris tries to talk Dalton out of his position, but obviously that's not doing much. And Dad reaches the real Dalton, and who is stuck in the further, and how he even got possessed is a complete mystery to me. I don't know. It beats me. They didn't really, again, that was very unclear how that went about. Anyway, they pass through a red door. How about that? And we see the dad stay behind and try to get Dalton to continue. So Dalton does. He makes his way back to his normal world, and he begins painting over the drawing that he made, which somehow correlates to the actual red door and covers that didn't paint, which the dad sees. I don't know. I guess that's just how this works. So yeah, they cover it up in the he's like, oh, we gotta save the past, gotta save the memories, but just hide them, I guess, or whatever. I don't know. Um, so, him and Chris are just hanging out, having a very grand old time now, unpossessed, all that great stuff. The dad is, we see a cutaway of him. He sees the woman from the videos who recognizes him, but he doesn't recognize her for some reason, even though I guess that year I guess did part 1 and 2 conceive in 1 year in terms of a timeline? I guess that has to be the case, otherwise he would recognize her, right? I guess. Otherwise, this part makes no sense. I don't know. Anyway, she's gone by the time he looks back. And Dad, or Dalton, even gets a day end visit. And that was Insidious, the Red Door. And for a finale, I was expecting a lot more. Well, actually, not really, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, Insidious, again, is a movie that I initially liked, at least the first time around watching it, and then rethinking upon it, has kind of dwindled in terms of its horror flair. And so its subsequent sequel, and now this, it doesn't really signify any potential for me if they do decide to continue it onward, or even if this is the end. For an end, this doesn't seem satisfying enough, and if it continues, then boy oh boy, I don't see what else they can do to rekindle anything from this franchise, quite frankly, already. I think they have beat the potential out of this right out of the gate, or, what I think they think is the potential for this type of movie, with the further being this sort of in-between space, and the amount of potential you could actually have with that sort of gimmick. So yeah, not great for a movie. The pacing is definitely a knock against a film, whereas again, you could have this type of pacing, but it is not the pacing alone. It is the pacing combined with the lack of creativity in the expansion of horror that they're willing to commit to here. It's pretty much depending all on the same thing, which is either slow-moving person, or ghost in this case, and that's really about the only gimmick they seem to conclude, except that one chase that brings the father into the further, but that's one instance. I'm sorry. One instance does not save your entire movie. That's not how this works. So, definitely needed to try a lot harder here. And yeah, so I'm gonna give this movie like a 3 out of 10, honestly, or a 4 if I really want to push it, but I wouldn't give it anything above that, quite frankly. And that's my review of Insidious, the Red Door. If you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out the links in the description when I over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers, so get a third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly, and fourth, to my Discord. We can join, collab, and chill, and all that cool stuff. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.